Okay. Again, I'm Tanya Lattner with the LLVM Foundation, and this talk is... Ooh, that was really loud. I got everyone's attention now. So this next part is going to be a bit of a working workshop. So I'm going to go through a short presentation, and then we're going to break into groups and do some brainstorming, and then come back together and share some of the ideas and things that you talked about. So today I'm going to talk about diverse leadership. Why diversity in leadership? Well, diversity in leadership leads to a diversity in ideas and opinions. It provides a wealth of experiences and varying perspectives, builds trust within the community, and having a diverse leadership makes that leadership more relatable to more people within the community. Diversity, the art of thinking independently together, Malcolm Forbes. So we're talking about leadership in the context of the LLVM project. So why be a leader in LLVM? First, it increases your visibility in the project. People recognize you, and you start to recognize them. They recognize the work you're doing. It's a fantastic opportunity to refine and expand leadership skills that you may or may not get in your day job. Maybe you aren't a tech lead at your company, but in LLVM, you are. It's great for networking, making connections to obtain knowledge that's necessary to do your job or get help with other code areas that you're not an expert in. And it's great for future job applications. It could also directly impact your participation, code contributions in an area you or your employer care quite a bit about. And it's extremely important to the overall success of the LLVM project. So what are the barriers to entry for leaders in our community? The one I hear most often is, I do not have enough time to do my job and be a leader in the LLVM community. And the time that they spent working on the open source aspects are often overlooked by their employer. They're not considered as part of their promotion when they're looking at the things that you've done over the last year. And it's also a part that's left out when scoping how long a certain project or task takes within a company. The time spent is not valued by an employer or beneficial for promotions. I said that already. And often some people are unsure about the requirements or what it really takes to be a leader or feel they don't meet them. Self-nomination is super hard. You're raising your hand saying, hey, I'm an expert, I'm the leader. I don't know about you, but I have a hard time doing that sometimes. That's that imposter syndrome coming into play. And hopefully this isn't a huge barrier to entry, but it's possible. People don't feel very welcome. Are there more that I haven't listed here? I'm sure. And I'm hoping when you guys talk together as groups, you'll be able to explore this a little bit more. So what are the different leadership positions in LLVM? The first one that comes to mind is probably code owners. And I'm going to deep dive into these all a little bit more in a few slides. The next is we have program community members that help, determine the program for events like LLVM developers meetings. We've got conference speakers. You'll see them over the next 2 or 3 days. We have this new notion of office hours. We have Google Summer of Code. We have Outreachy, different mentorship programs. And then we've got the LLVM Code of Conduct Committee members, 2 of which you saw on the stage at the panel just a little while ago. And LLVM Foundation board members. We are a nonprofit, and we would love to have more diversity within our board itself. There's many other leadership positions that I'm probably overlooking here. So let's deep dive a little bit into code owners. So if you've ever gone to the LLVM website, this is the definition of a code owner. I'm going to dive in a bit. You don't have to read all that. So what is the code owner's role? Basically, all that blurb said was code owners are in charge of making sure that code, before it goes into LLVM, gets reviewed. You as a code owner are responsible. That is your main job, to make sure high quality code is going into LLVM. But could it mean more? So code owners can be equated similar to technical lead of a team. Like I said, they ensured high quality code through reviews. That is very important. I don't want to not say it isn't. But that doesn't mean you're doing all the code reviews yourself. It's not a one-person job. What I'd love to see happen is this code owner role integrate a sense of mentorship. So you are mentoring the next set of reviewers, training them, encouraging them to become reviewers, and eventually code owners. As a code owner, you should be the point of contact, a guide to others, to find others in the community that are experts. But with saying all this, we can't overburden our code owners. They're already doing a lot of work. Do we need another kind of leadership role in the LLVM project? In that blurb that I also put on the screen, there was a code owner selection process. Well, actually, there wasn't a code owner selection process. We don't really have one. It's effectively self-nomination or opt-in. I personally think self-nominating is scary. I think that's probably pretty intimidating to a lot of people, and that's why they're not nominating themselves. But someone else can nominate you. But the problem with that is sometimes that can keep those nominations within their social circle or the people that they know. And so you tend to have this fulfilling cycle of like, it's really of a friend that keeps getting the code owner position. You never expand that network. And lastly, this is probably the biggest statement. Diversity is an afterthought and not considered earlier on. I mentioned this in a discourse post, and kind of the feedback I got was, yes, it is important. It's a little controversial, and it's often met with the response, we need to make sure we have high quality code. I don't understand why does the thought of diversity automatically trigger thoughts of unqualified candidates. I'd like to dispel that notion. Jumping into the next leadership role, conference speakers and program committee. We try really hard to, have a great group of talks at our events, but we could do a lot more to improve the diversity of the speakers at our LLVM developers meeting. We don't really have any current work being focused on that to improve the process. It's just an open call for proposals. And right now that doesn't seem to be working. We also make more efforts into the diversity of the program committee, but by sending out personal invitations, but this can often lead to the same people being asked over and over again to do these roles, and they get burnt out. Mentorship and office hours. Mentorship, like Google Summer of Code or Outreachy. I am so grateful for the mentors that we do have that participate in this program, but again, it tends to be the same people mentoring year after year. That can also lead to a lot of burnout. I'd love to see more diversity in the mentors and interns, a wider spectrum of projects, and more participation in Outreachy. It's been quite hard to get people to be a mentor in Outreachy when the program isn't that much different than Google Summer Code. Maybe the focus is a little different, but it's the same idea. You're mentoring new contributors to the open source project. Later today, Christoph is going to talk about office hours. If you haven't heard of this, this is open, think of it as an open video chat where people can join and talk to you about a specific topic. I think this is a fantastic idea. I'd love to see more people join in. But the internet is scary. How can we ensure that these are safe places? And how can we encourage more people to offer them? So I've kind of run through a bunch of different leadership positions. I didn't touch on the Code of Conduct Committee or nonprofit boards yet. But what we're going to do in a minute is I want to break into 4 different groups. The first will be the code owner section. So people who are interested in improving code ownership within LLVM project, you're gonna meet over here in this corner with this whiteboard, or flip chart, excuse me. Conference speakers and program committee, if you're interested in that, that's back here in this corner. Then we have mentorship and office hours, which is in the back of the room. And then in the final corner is other roles, code of conduct committee, nonprofit boards, or maybe you want to talk about new leadership positions within the LLVM community. But I'm not going to leave you to figure this out on your own. Attached to those flip charts are some guiding questions. For those who are interested in improving code ownership within LLVM, I'd like you to think about what are the barriers to entry for this position? How can we remove or lower them? What about the role could be improved to benefit diversity and the LLVM project? Things like the selection process, the responsibilities, some of the things that I touched on at the beginning of the presentation. And should the code owner role be divided up? Maybe this is controversial, I'm not sure, but we've seen some of this happening in parts of the project where we don't have one code owner that is overseeing all the large section of code. They're breaking it down into different parts. So let's think about how we can divide up the code owner role a little bit. Of course, these are just guiding questions. I'm sure you guys all have fantastic ideas, and I'd really like you to talk amongst each other. You don't need to stick to just these. For those interested in conference speakers and program committees, what about the process or the call for papers process can we improve to encourage more diversity in our conference speakers? Would more training or education about speaking be beneficial? Would it be useful to actively seek out speakers? And then related to the other side of the equation, how can we appeal to more folks to be on the program committee? What motivates people to do this? Is it a thankless job? And what are the barriers to entry as well for being on program committee? I'm wondering how many of you actually know what the program committee does here and how much work is involved with it. I'm guessing probably not everyone. For the mentorship and office hours group, I'd like you to look at how we can maintain a diverse set of open projects and beginner bugs. How could we better incentivize mentors for Google Summer of Code and Outreachy? And I touched on this a bit, it's hard to take time away from your other responsibilities. How can we convince employers that this is worth their time? And should we introduce more education, like comprehensive mentorship guides? For office hours, how can we ensure safe spaces and encourage a more diverse participation with office hours in both hosting them and with those attending? And the last group in the corner, what are the barriers to entry for nonprofit boards? So being on a nonprofit board and running a nonprofit, whenever we look for board members, it does tend to be a select few that do apply. Could more training be beneficial or resources about it? Or what value does being on a nonprofit board give to individuals? For the code of conduct, you saw earlier how beneficial and important this is to the LLVM project and the community. How can we get more people to be on the code of conduct board? And what are the barriers to entry? And how can we ensure that their participation is positive? So with all that said, we are going to now break into groups. And I think, let's see, it's 4 o'clock. We'll probably give like 20 minutes or so to sort of brainstorm, work together. And what I'd like you to do is to use the flip charts, and afterwards we're going to take a picture of it and digitize that information. Don't feel like you have to take detailed notes on your computer. You can if you want to. But so with that, I'm going to leave you guys to figure out what is your interest, and let's all work together to try to improve the diversity and leadership in LLVM. Okay, if I could get everyone to take a seat. This is like my favorite part of Community.o workshops is where everyone gets together in groups and keeps talking, and they can't make them stop. It's awesome. So thank you for being such active participants in this workshop. And I really look forward to hearing what all of you guys talked about. So does anyone want to volunteer to go first? Or should I just pick someone? All right, Jessica, we're over here. If you could use the microphone that's on the stand, I think she can just grab it. Is that okay? Yes, great.
Okay, so first off, we found out it's really hard to talk about code ownership because it's really not well defined. So we spent like the first 20 minutes trying to come up with an automated system to automate code ownership related stuff. And then we realized, wait, this doesn't actually make any sense. What would we be measuring? This thing will probably be run like twice a year or something, and then probably silently break, and then nobody will actually like know what's going on. So then we started actually talking about, okay, what are the actual problems that we were supposed to solve here? So we did mention that one code owner is probably not great for the whole barrier to entry related thing, because when that person goes away, what do? They just nominate their friend, and then that just goes on forever. If we had 2 people or 3 people or N people kind of working together on this thing, we'd actually kind of have somebody who's getting mentored, and they're able to actually kind of take on the role naturally. We also talked about talking about code owners as kind of default reviewers versus like kind of a like long-term job. This was when we were talking about the automated system, but I thought I'd bring it up because it was written down. Let's see. There's also kind of questions that we had as we started talking about code ownership a bit more. Like for example, there's certain things throughout the project where it's kind of everywhere, like Windows support. Like if you're the code owner of Windows support, you're the code owner of a lot of different things, versus if you're the code owner of a specific pass, like these have a different kind of scale. So whatever we come up with kind of needs to address that as well. And let's see, we talked a bit about the barriers to entry for code ownership as well. Something that we don't have right now is any structure whatsoever. The current structure is there is a text file. And if you believe that you are an expert at something, you could say, I am the big man, and I should be the person who owns all of iCell. And then you put your name in the text file, like maybe a year later after review. And now you're the owner of iCell until you pass on the torch to somebody else. So what we should actually have is some sort of process that tells people, hey, you've reached some sort of milestone towards becoming a code owner. Without that, it's really hard to even begin talking about this problem at all. And also, we did mention that code owners nominating somebody to take over is a point of potential bias introduction in the process, because they're probably bringing in their friend or their friend of a friend. And that friend or friend of a friend is probably a very good person who knows a lot, but maybe they're not necessarily the best person to take over, or maybe somebody else should also be considered for that opportunity. That's pretty much all we had. So, yeah.
Great, thank you. That's fantastic.
Who's next?
All right, looks like we're doing Code of Conduct Committee and Nonprofit Boards next.
All right. Is this working? All right. So I think we didn't do a very good job of staying on topic. We talked about what it takes to get on the Code of Conduct Committee and Nonprofit Board. We talked about some of the corporate, like employer barriers to that. So the need to talk to your legal department and get sign off to be on the LLVM Foundation board. We talked about maybe the foundation could work to sort of work with large employers and sort of go through a process of saying, like, we want all of your employees to be able to contribute to LLVM. So what do you need from us to make this, I don't know, something like that. We kind of quickly moved on, though, to talking about the problem of getting employers to recognize the value of working on open source projects. And we had a couple ideas. We talked about measuring the amount of work that employees are doing contributing to open source projects, how they are working on code reviews and community giving talks, community engagement, contributing to design reviews, things like that, and then putting that next to important things that the company is getting out of the open source project, and using that to do more to justify investing in the open source project. Talked about the cost of maintaining internal local patches, things like this. What else we got? We spent a while talking about leadership and the need to move beyond our, relatively informal processes and sort of scale up. We really spent a lot of time talking about code ownership here. So a lot of overlap. I think I heard Jessica mention, a tool that would actually tell you. I don't know. Maybe you didn't. Maybe I just imagined that you said this, but I suggested that we have a tool that could actually take the code owner file and tell you I give you a patch, and then you tell me who are the right points of contact. Right. This is something that companies have, other projects have. Make it a little bit more formal than what we currently have, the text file. What else have we got? Oh yeah. No, that was a really good point. Okay, creating more visibility for new contributions. So we could have either we could have some scripts that collect first-time contributors from Git logs, and then publish them in either a monthly blog post, or as part of the LLVM weekly, or as part of the release notes. So on a 6-month time horizon, right? So these are the new contributors who contributed to the release. And one of the things I thought was good about that was we talked about career building in the outreachy talk there. Contributing to open source and getting your name out there is really important for a lot of people. And so getting those first-time contributors, getting their name out there in release notes seems important and useful. That was good. Yeah, okay, I think this was continuing on that topic. We talked about expanding the idea to include not just first-time contributors, but I don't know, gamification, things like so-and-so has landed their 10th, 50th, 100th patch to LLVM, that kind of stuff. What else we got? Oh, yeah, longevity. Okay, yeah, so milestones of years of contribution.
Does GitHub let LLVM create badges? Because I see other badges there.
Yeah, I don't know. Badges. We should look into that. Yeah. What else we got? Momentum? What do we say about momentum? Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. We come together in these meetings. We all get excited in these in-person meetings, and then unfortunately this happens right before the holiday season, and so it's hard to keep things going. So what were our ideas for actually solving that? Oh yeah, basically take an action item to repost all this stuff in January. take all these flipboards and actually get them out there summarized so that the whole community can see what we're talking about here. Yeah.
Okay, it seems like we really cascaded down away from our main topic. But I think what we realized when we were talking about barriers for entry is this idea that these, committees and boards, they're this high up thing. How do we get newcomers to feel like they're a part of the community? How do we keep people feeling like a part of the community and that things are actually getting done? So I think that's how it all related. And so we started talking about formality and encouraging more community in it. It made sense. And recognition to get to that point. Yeah. You know what I mean? Okay.
Great, thank you. I think we need to move on to the next group in the interest of time, so thank you.
Okay, so we were focused on mentorship and office hours, and we started off by talking about some challenges with maintaining beginner bugs. For LLVM, the beginner bugs can be too complex, or sometimes a more experienced developer can solve it in a shorter amount of time. So we thought to a couple things. We could focus on less time-sensitive bugs. One idea was code cleanup bugs. Another idea is when you have a bug that's relatively quick for someone who's experienced, to maybe do pair programming sessions with experienced developer and a mentee. And then another idea is leaving detailed comments on bugs that people have solved so that newcomers have a place to start. We also talked about creating videos of debugging or investigating bugs. So again, other tools, resources for mentees. Another thing was maybe using code spaces as a virtual environment to simplify setup so people can overcome that hurdle, because sometimes people kind of get lost in just getting everything set up and a little bit discouraged. And let's see. Also, for mentors, to keep them engaged, we thought it might be useful to have a mentor space where mentors can collaborate with each other. And like if their mentee is stuck and maybe the mentor has reached as far as they can get in solving a technical problem, to just have a cohort of other mentors that you can kind of bounce ideas off of and or maybe just get unblocked. And then we went into sometimes solving a beginner feature might be easier than solving a bug. So having features be on the list of beginner contributions. And also, then we kind of branched into advertising and getting more diverse engagement. So we want to make sure that people who are participating aren't just like community members as for office hours. And so one thing we talked about is different ways to advertise that we have office hours. And we talked about, oh, what's on here? Okay, then we did talk about, I'm just gonna skip ahead here, setting up LinkedIn for LLVM project maybe, since a lot of college students are on LinkedIn, that might be a good place for LLVM to start advertising, and then also maybe mentioning the office hours in the newsletter, since people would probably be subscribed there, or even a Google Calendar for office hours or mentorship contributions, and then, oh yeah, back to advertising for office hours. Let's see. Yeah, office hours have been really effective, but just the involvement has been pretty low. So we want to get the word out that they're happening. And then as far as getting your company or team to be on board with participating in mentorship programs like Outreachy and GSOC, kind of just expressing that there's some overhead in one engineer working on things, and that having help, such as a mentee, would be a good investment. Yeah, and I think that's kind of where we ended. Is there anything else?
So I think a couple more things is that for starter box, sorry, 1 minute, I see. So code reviews are also a good way to learn things. So maybe, it's useful to get code reviews from newcomers. So maybe code owners could like add new members of the community to code reviews. And we talked a little bit about how to convince your management there is value in mentorship, and we said that it ties with recruiting, and you could get help for your project. If you mentor someone, they can help you like work on your project, but then it's harder to choose that project because it has to be not very urgent, you know. Anyway, there's some tricky parts there. I think we're out of time, but we are actually finished, so.
Great, thank you. And now we got 5 minutes. We'll do the last group over here in the corner, and then we'll do a quick little wrap up. So we'll do this corner group.
Hey, so 5 minutes, I'll keep it super quick, yeah? Okay, so this is about conference speakers and program committee. I'll go through the points here and read from here, it's easiest. So can we change anything about the call for papers process? So we were talking about perhaps, where are we? So one idea was like perhaps clarifying the purpose and the scope of this conference versus, for example, academic conferences. That would help. What makes it actually unique, right? So okay, that's one idea. Clarifying successful submissions. What does a successful, or like what does a submission look like, right? Perhaps also like folks from academia are more accustomed to like lengthy papers. That's not the case here. So what is then the case? Would more training or education about speaking be beneficial? One idea, so yes. One idea was, actually this goes both for speaking and for the program committee members. So for speakers, perhaps having like pointers to, hey, this was a great, on YouTube, this was a great speaking sessions, right? I wouldn't say speaker necessarily. For the committee, there was this idea of a shadow committee. So this would be like a trainee committee that just looks over the shoulder and pretends they're actually doing the committeeing, but doesn't actually impact the final outcome, but has a chance to actually be provided feedback and so on and so forth. So it's a way to train the next PC, if you will. Let me see, nothing else there. Okay. Would it be useful to actively seek out speakers? Yes. So, I mean, that was what came out. Like, but yes, there's nothing else to add to that. How can we appeal to more folks to be on the program committees? So what motivates people to do it now? So a bunch of folks said things like, like just wanting to contribute back, wanting to represent underrepresented communities, perhaps. Also an opportunity to learn, right? Like you get to see firsthand what other people are doing. Networking. One idea was like, hey, perhaps, program committee members can get a discount. I'm not gonna say, okay. What are the barriers to entry? So a couple of things came up here. One was, so to entry as a committee member, time expectations, like that could be clarified, right? So what would the time expectations be? And what the review expectations are. So mirror of what's a successful submission? What is a good review look like, right? Having a few samples of that would help. Also, that idea of the shadow committee comes back here. Yeah, so training how to review, basically, like how to provide constructive feedback, perhaps a way to upvote good reviews, and making, the model reviews available to the next program committee set. That's it. Did I see it?
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.